Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
So film, it allows us to escape, to be challenged, transformed, and ultimately to consider what it means to be human. So also, thankfully, the broadening palette of the movies that we get to watch, and also I think our broadening appetite of the movies that we want to actually view, means that we're exploring the full diversity and full range of what it is to be human. So film is, however, more than just artistic expression, it is business. The 2016 Deloitte report found that in 2014, I can't believe this, the Australian film industry combined over 3,000 million in value to the Australian economy, and also 25,000 full-time jobs, which is pretty extraordinary. And then furthermore, the core Australian content generated 252 million in export earnings. So apparently it's much more than even the Sydney Opera House, our film industry. And I think we can see not just the Australian movie, but different films at Palm Beach that are reflecting our way of life. So, of course, to help us understand the creativity and also the commerciality of the business, we're thrilled to have an all-star cast. So I'll start with Rachel. It's been a big month for you. You have become a grandma with Zan. Yay! You've also, your second feature film, Palm Beach, opened to the Sydney Film Festival to great success, and a cast of stars, which is pretty amazing. And also, I just want you to welcome the 3 times Golden Globe nominated actor, screenwriter of Beautiful Kate and Palm Beach, and AFI nominated director Rachel Ward. Please come to the stage. I'll make you not sit in that. Right in the middle for me, this one. Now, Alex White, I learned that Alex, where's Kate? So Kate DJ'd at Alex's wedding, and I had no idea of this serendipitous connection. I didn't know you even DJ'd. That's a whole other story. But Kate's the curator of the Golden Age Cinema, so very much a film buff. But Alex is a multi-award-winning short film producer and also founder of White Folk Films. Her titles include Florence Has Left the Building, which is so great, and it's got your partner, real-life partner, Eden Falk, in that as a Elvis impersonator, and Trespass with regular collaborator and writer-director Mira Fulks. So you're currently in post-production, currently exhausted on your first feature film, Babyteeth, with Jan Chapman, who's been on this stage last year as executive producer. So please welcome Alex to the stage. Alex White. Nice and close. And then Shannon was named the most influential NIDA graduate of the decade by the Sydney Magazine. She's an award-winning theatre, and are you shy of me reading all these? Or you? I can see you squirming there. Theatre director and deviser, so you no doubt recognise her work from Love Child, Offspring, Sisters, Rake, and also you were nominated for an Australian Directors Guild Award for the SBS miniseries On the Ropes, which is, I'm mad about boxing, so that's such a great program, that one. So in your directorial debut, you've just finished the directorship with Babyteeth, so again, exhausted, but please welcome Shannon Murphy to the stage. Ladies, so let's start with Palm Beach. So we've opened Sydney Film Festival with this amazing film. And it came from something that happened a long time ago, and overseas I think it was a premise of friends getting together and having an altercation. Tell us about what happened and how that turned into this movie.
Well, it was just one of those times when friends come together and the expectations are very high, as they usually are, and how everything kind of everyone was sort of going through this existential crisis, and everything kind of imploded, as they do.
Lots of alcohol.
So, yeah, and it was, I walked away and went, oh, well, you know, the next existential crisis that, you know, you go through these various milestones once you've had a child, once, you know, the career's dipped and dived and come up again or whatever. And then you go into this sort of time when everyone's supposed to be sort of slowing down, but are you kind of ready to slow down? And guys who've identified themselves with their jobs, with their high-flying jobs in this case, and someone who had a very, you know, very successful business, sold his business, and someone who'd been in banking, and he sort of identified with who he was through the club he used to go to, and he was sort of rather pathetically sort of trotting off to the club so that they would say, oh, hello, welcome, do you want your usual table? And they were all in this sort of weird state. And Brian was actually had a lot of anxiety, which I won't go into, but just he was also, surprise, surprise, sort of shaking with his age and an illness that he had. And he walked away and he went, oh, there's a really universal thing going on here. And I went, no, it's just they were all just having their usual, their usual traumas. And he went, no, I really think there's something here to be mined. And then we went to see Fury, that Joanna Murray-Smith had done, which was a fabulous play that she did. And we both sort of looked at each other and nudged each other at the same time and went, oh, she's so great at writing sort of, about sort of middle-class expectations and the sort of the fact that quite often about privilege and how privilege actually isn't all it's necessarily supposed to be, and that people are still human in those, even when they've got, they're able to pay the mortgage or send their kids to school. In Fury, it was a kid who'd suddenly turned feral and he'd become a terrorist, and he came from this sort of very middle-class, safe North Shore background, and everything was imploding. And so Joanna came on board.
I guess you don't say no when Rachel Ward and Brian Brown ask you to.
No, we were really happy to get Joe, but it was, so then that's how it came about.
And what I find interesting, though, is that you didn't just assume the role of director. You co-wrote the script, but then it was more that...
No, I did wait sort of patiently.
Pick me.
Like, this is a really good idea, darling. Yeah, great. Yes, I think you should get Joanna, and, how's it going? And then there was sort of... And then I kept pushing names forward of people who should be doing it. And I think it would be really good to do this. He's got a really good touch. And I kept saying he, for some reason, anyway.
To direct it.
For direct, I kept thinking... I don't know. Actually, it was Wayne
Blair.
Wayne Blair. Wayne would be perfect for this. And anyway, they went to have a meeting, and apparently they had a meeting in Screen Australia, and name. Head of Sally Kaplan, exactly. Sally said, she didn't know we were married. She said, who I think would be really good for this is Rachel Ward, who did this film called Beautiful Kate. And she was from England, and she hadn't realised that Brian was married to me. And he went, I think I can probably get an appointment with her.
That's so great.
So that's sort of how it came about. So.
And speaking of names and name dropping, in the film we have Sam Neill, Brian Brown, Richard E. Grant, who you'd worked with years ago. Greta Skarkey, who was your nemesis, would always take your roles, or vice versa.
No,
Jacqueline
not vice versa.
Heather Mitchell, Aaron Jeffrey, and also your daughter Matilda.
Yeah.
So tell us, was it harder to work with people that you know, or was it easier? What was it dynamic like?
Well, since none of them are here, I can tell dirty secrets. It's interesting because I know Sam and Richard and Brian extremely well, and I know they've been actors for a very long time, and I know their shtick. Yeah. I know what they're comfortable in doing, and it'd be interesting to hear you talk about Ben, who does it not quite as much, but who isn't quite as old, hasn't quite got there yet. But they, I think when you've been acting for a very long time, you work out what character works best for you, how audiences best respond to you. And they kind of all got their way of doing things, approaching things. And as I know them all personally, those characters have got nothing to do with them. Yeah. I don't hardly recognize them for their characters that they've decided that Sam Neill is, and Brian is, I don't know. They've sort of got their way of being. And I didn't want those people. I wanted who I knew them to be, who were real, vulnerable, suffering, sort of human beings with all their frailties and annoyances and etc. And so it was quite difficult getting them to stop doing Sam Neill, Brian Brown, and not so much acting, but just what they were comfortable, how they were comfortable interpreting the material. So, I had different ways of approaching each of them on how to sort of try and I was successful mostly, but I look at it and I go, there's a bit of, that he's falling back on that again. But it's amazing how sometimes I think I've let it slip through. For instance, the moment when Richard does this on the glass. It is funny.
So funny.
But it's not real. I mean, it's pushing the thing, you know, it's sort of slightly pushing the envelope, and suddenly, and I really wanted that scene had to be so real, had to really feel his vulnerability and his need for, he goes after Heather Mitchell, who's fed up with him and is leaving. And he chases after her and he does this sort of spiel to her. And the cab driver turns around and says, don't believe him. And he really has to sell the idea that he desperately needs his wife to stay with him. And he did, you know, and he did resort to his thing on the thing, and I went, but, you know, and we did this certain ways, but everybody laughs when they see it. So, you know it does work. They know what
You still got a deeply tragic performance out of him, though, in that moment.
Did,
it was great.
Did you think so?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
good.
definitely.
All right.
Yeah.
Good.
And the interesting thing, this is Beautiful Kate was 10 years ago and deals with such different delicate subject matter.
I've learned.
And that's the thing, you're unashamedly sort of playing to the demographic that works for, you know, moviegoers.
Yeah,
and
I am. I'm very, I think we probably all are nervous of losing audiences. You know, Australians don't really go to we don't have the money to push our films as much as the Americans do. So of course they come front and center, and it's very hard to get our projects out there, you know, to get, hey, we're there, we're in the cinemas, we're there for a week. Unless you go the first week, the cinema owners start to think, no, I think we'll get the new Ben Stiller in one instead, or the new this one in there. And sometimes there isn't time for word to spread, so you can get these fantastic things that will really deliver, but there just isn't the time for the word of mouth to happen. So for me, I'm sort of energized by the idea of getting audiences back into the cinema, whatever that takes. And there's I think all of us certainly us filmmakers are riveted by the sort of the darker side of humanity. You know, I mean, like my first story is incest, brother and sister incest. And Brian said, do you really want to do this about incest? And I went, yeah, kind of riveted by that. No, not good. You know, it was fine. It did fine. But you know, in the end, we've got to get people in the cinemas. And so yeah, I kind of went. We all went. What is working out there? Who's going to the cinemas? What is that audience? What are they looking for? What are they? You know, it's a real equation, mathematical equation, and there's no magic bullet. But you can look at things and go, aspirational is good. You know, the audience, we like to think that we're outlaws and underclass, but actually we're not. Yeah. We're 80% middle class, and a lot of us cling to the coast and have, you know, pretty good lifestyles. And a lot of us like to see nice soft furnishings. Yeah.
Low slung design houses.
So, yeah. So we sort of unashamedly went, okay, without losing your star, without losing your creativity or your how do you describe it, or I think it is kind of, somebody said to me, you know, without losing your star, and I think that is without losing what it is that gives you the funnel from which you want to say something. I think we all have to work much harder at getting audiences back into the cinemas.
Yeah, I agree. And I appreciate that it's a snapshot of where we're at, rather than these cultural cringe sort of, you know, the shtick of Crocodile Dundee and those sorts of the rougher side.
I mean, you know, the first to admit, they've really worked. They're fabulous. They had their time, yeah, and they were great. I mean, I'm riveted to know what it was. How did Dressmaker do it? How did Men in Black do it? You know, I'm interested to know what it was, those things that.
Men in Black is the other one. Women in Black.
Women in Black.
So did I say Men in Black?
I know how they did that.
Women in Black.
Well, let's move to another film. Let's look at Babyteeth. And Shannon, if you can have any sense of perspective after all of your kind of directing, tell us a synopsis of the film. Or do you want Alex
No, it's
to do
it's interesting because it's one of the trickiest films to give a synopsis for, and it's something we talk about quite a lot. It is a story, it's like a heightened dysfunctional family drama in a way, because in a sense, the parents in this story
Ben Mendelsohn.
And Essie Davis. And actually everyone in this story, in some way or another, is self-medicating. So they have a lot of complications in their relationships anyway, but it's all exasperated, I guess, by the fact that they're all on medication of some form.
She's unwell.
And she's unwell. And so, but at its core, it's a love story. And it's about falling in love for the first time and how, as you're becoming your adult self, you're testing boundaries with your parents, and how for them that's both, it's quite heartbreaking for them to try and let go of their daughter as they know her. So.
And Alex, you first saw this in 2012, opening night at the Belvoir, when at the theatre of the same name. So tell us about that moment when you approached Rita and why you thought it would translate so well.
I'd actually known Rita for a really long time.
She's a playwright.
Yeah, she's an actress, playwright, and not so much acting anymore. So our paths were crossing every day as she was sort of writing in rehearsal, so I was really geared up to go to the opening night of that show. And Jan Chapman, who's the executive producer, and I were sitting on opposite sides of the theatre, and we kind of went down into the foyer, and I don't know if you know Jan, but she's sort of got bright red hair. I just saw this kind of woman making a beeline for me saying, this is it, because we'd been looking for something to develop together for a long time. So, yeah, it was really a natural progression. We just sort of invited Rita to have a chat to talk about what her vision would be, to make it a cinematic proposition. And it was just so clear in that moment that she was the right person to take it to the next kind of, variation of the play. And yeah, I mean, we were in development for over 6 years, so it's been a really long journey. And about 2 years ago, we got Shannon on board, which was so exciting because I've known Shannon as well for a while, and I've been following her career and enjoying her short films. And I mean, I would have loved to have made a short with Shannon, really, but I was just so busy on my other ones.
I did ask you once and you said no.
It's true.
From memory.
I was busy. So yeah, it was just really exciting to kind of create this team and then to get it finally financed, which was incredibly difficult.
Tell us about that, the financing process, because it's something familiar to all of you. So what does it take to get a film up?
I mean, like, sort of what Rachel said, I guess Babyteeth is a really difficult story to pitch. And so, I would meet with various international sales agents and try and get them on board. And they were all frightened of the cancer element of the story. And, I don't think I could have said enough, this is not a cancer story. Whereas our local distributor, who's once incredibly hard to get, fell in love with it straight away. So, it was E1, but now it's Universal, like you.
Oh,
yeah. So yeah, it's just getting people, I think, to fall in love with the project the same way that you do. And when we could get people to read the script, it would open them up to kind of the beauty of it and the comedy.
How did you get Ben Mendelsohn to sign in and come back from the States?
Same thing. He read the script. We were really fortunate. We've all got quite a close relationship with his agent, and she actually was working in the same building as Jan and I, and so she was hearing about Babyteeth for years, and she sort of was like, oh, maybe, you should read it. And then he read it and he loved it. We were like, oh my God, what are we going to do now? And it helped because it was sort of right at the time that we were going into Screen Australia, for their support. So I think that really sort of sealed the deal, I think.
And just to stay with you for one more question on that, Screen Australia, you were the recipient of one of their grants. So tell us about that.
That was incredible. I got the enterprise funding, which was sort of 2 years, kind of like a full-time salary, sort of like a fellowship to kind of just develop my slate. So it kind of meant I didn't have to do all my odd jobs to keep myself paying my rent, which was wonderful because I just really could focus on the kind of producing I wanted to do. And I think I made a few short films in that time as well, Trespass being one of them. And it was just an incredible experience to be able to kind of totally focus on something that I think is really hard to do if you want to do it independently. So it was really, really very, very lucky.
Yeah, amazing. And Shannon, for you, it's your debut directorship, but you're very experienced. And how is this different to TV and to theatre that you've been working on?
It's really different to theatre. I'd done theatre for 10 years and, directing theatre is like directing an entire film in a wide shot. So I actually went to film school when I decided to make the switch from theatre to film because I knew that I needed the technical skills and the language and the confidence to really understand the difference. And then TV, though, was an incredible training ground for me to then go into a feature. And I was very lucky because On the Ropes came just before the feature film. So that's a 4-hour mini-series. And so I'd basically made the equivalent of 2 films just prior to walking straight into Babyteeth. So I wasn't nervous at all about going into that, actually. And Screen Australia gave me a grant about 5 years ago called Talent Escalator. It's a funny title, where I got to be connected to Imogen Banks, who's a producer, for 6 months. And that allowed me to I didn't want to do a directing attachment because then usually you're just on set watching a director direct, which I firstly find really boring.
To be hands-on.
And you also always feel really weird because you're just sort of sniffing around the monitor, which nobody wants anyway. And so I wanted to work out how the decisions are made by the producer and in the story room and all of that. So I got to do so many different jobs during that time, and that's what made me really go, oh, I'd love to do television. I was one of the only people in my class at film school that constantly would put my hand up going, no, I want to do TV, I want to do TV, because it was still kind of is sometimes a little bit of an idea of film is the real high art form and TV not so much, but that's really changed, I think. You might not think that. I don't know.
Accidental Soldier. Yeah. I loved that.
No, I don't think it's. I don't think it's changed. I think those opportunities are fantastic. I think, but my only thing is that basically, film is the director's medium, and from my experience, television is the producers and writers' medium. They basically are the ones who are, in the end, dictating the tone and most
for long-running series, unless you get to do a mini-series.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
a mini-series is like the perfect combination, but they happen too few. There's too few opportunities, and they don't do they really don't do the 80, 90-minute film, which is, I don't know, maybe I'm just old school, but I've just got so used to, and I guess that's a whole other thing for the next generation coming up, is to understand storytelling on this much longer format. For me, I've so grown up in it, and I've so been schooled and love the 90-minute format. Yeah. It just seems to, the beginning, the middle, and an end, and all in 90 minutes, done. But, I get...
Ours is not 90 minutes.
Yeah, really?
No.
But we're referencing an article that Rachel wrote in at the beginning of the film festival, which was about the loss of authorship from the director. So expand on that, because I think it was such a, it's such
I
a
just
great
felt
point.
I was doing the McPherson lecture, and I just really thought I needed to stir the pot a bit, stir the shit, because you're going to get up there, you need to sort of have something to say. So, well, how am I going to do to really annoy as many people as I can?
I know, it made me go, what?
Yeah, and I just kind of went, we're all aware of the fact that, obviously we're still spending a lot of time in our living rooms watching this fabulous stuff streaming through. And what's the reason to go out to the movies and pay all that money for babysitters and parking and blah, blah, blah. And, it's inevitable. It is becoming, apart from the tentpole and apart from, focus to the 50-pluses who have the disposable incomes and can go and do it and whatever, that middle section is really, we're losing that audience. And it's going to television. Fine, rightly so. But with that, in my mind, went not so much the auteurs, because they will go too, but I just wasn't seeing where, from my own experience of doing television, having to compromise so much with the running series, or coming in as a second director and picking up the formula that everybody had preset. There was really my vision, my instinct of storytelling, my way of doing stuff, which is no better than anybody else's, but in film you're given that power. And it's fabulous. And you don't want to let it go.
How would you encapsulate your style? Because I want to ask both of you that question. So that voice is really important. What is it, the Rachel Ward style? Is there something that you can put your finger on as a director?
No.
Okay.
Not really. Not really. I mean, you know what you like and what your choices are, but I couldn't encapsulate that particularly. I mean, performance is probably my thing. Truth is my thing. I'm not really interested in fancy camera, and I'm not really interested in camera being intrusive. I don't want to see the camera. I don't want to be made aware of the camera. I want to be into the psychological shit that goes on between us. I want the subtext. I want to, so you can't, I could show you putting together a scene about why I'm making certain choices, but it's very difficult, isn't it, to sort of say whereas a lot of people, I would say, like in Tarantino, a lot of the auteurs, absolutely, you can tell clearly what it is that they're going after. And I certainly wouldn't give myself that mantle. But, we all have our...
Because most women don't too, though.
No. Well,
what woman calls themselves an auteur, let's be honest.
We've never had that. And it was very much also saying that we'd missed that opportunity to be auteurs, really, because that was something I didn't really see that possibility, really, with the demise of film, that happening in television. But,
and then for you, Shannon, how are you finding your way, and how is it evolving from TV into film, the way that you're making choices?
Look, with television, I have to say I feel like I have an incredible amount of freedom in the blocks that I direct creatively. But a lot of that's because, I guess, coming from theatre into television, I'm like, oh my God, I've got so much more money to play with. Whereas there's so many more restrictions in theatre that for me, I just go, it was like a complete playground. And I also love the challenge of coming into a series that's already running and set up and going, how am I going to put my stamp on this without, you don't ever want people to watch it and go, oh, that's really weird and different. Like you have to still be in the style of it, but I love adding my own personality and influence into it. So I actually really enjoy that. And I actually found, like at film school, I remember them saying, films where it's all free and you get to do exactly what you want, and TV's where it's restrictive. And I actually found it to be the opposite, only in the sense that you have a much smaller, we had a small team. And so we were getting so many more people to do all the jobs that I was used to a much bigger team doing. And it was a lot harder. More rewarding in many ways because it is 100% ours. And I was amazed the first time I showed Alex and Jan a cut of the film. I'd never had this experience where they went, just make it longer. And I was like, no one has ever said those words to me in television. And so I went, oh, wow, this is something different. And so that was very exciting. So there are pros and cons. Yeah, 2 points.
That's why we're not 90 minutes, perhaps.
But I don't know. I have to say, I think I love television and film equally for very different reasons. But
well, let's pan over to the producer. Can you encapsulate the role of a producer? Is it like the CEO of a small business? It's you kind of from the start to the end, Alex. What do you do?
Deal with stress.
Deal with stress, everything. You're like an accountant, you're a business manager, you're a psychiatrist, you're...
They're an enabler for, really for all of us to have the fun.
Yeah.
So is it the one with holding the wheel or the reins?
Everything,
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult, and I think that there aren't many people I've learnt now on the other side.
It's not really a job for one person, but it often is one person doing it.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of like Australian producers now kind of pairing up and not taking on the job themselves. Maybe not necessarily like actually producing the one thing, but having a company. So at the end of the day, you've got someone you can kind of rely on or have that conversation with, like, that contract didn't make any sense to me. Poor Shannon had to do that a few times. So it's just, it was incredibly stressful. So probably doing it again, I wouldn't do it on my own, 100%.
And then what about as an EP for Jan Chapman? What was that?
She was amazing.
And what was she doing as far as mentorship for you?
She was involved she was actually producing the film with me, and then a few years in, she went, look, I think you should just do this on your own, and I'll executive produce it. And it was good, like, it was the right decision. Because there's a lot of pressure that comes with producing, like, not necessarily just the financing. Well, it's even just the responsibility of having the producer offset. You've got this huge loan that, you're going to pay it back, but there's somewhere in the back of your head, you're like, oh my God, I owe someone like $1 million. So, she was like, I kind of want to do that again just this minute. So taking all that on was taking on all that responsibility on my own, which was fine. It is a lot, but...
Brian's done 6 films. He would never do it on his own. No.
He
learned that very long time ago.
Yeah, I think
it's too much, too hard, too much to take it all.
Yeah. And it's just, also it's like your strength. Like, I know what my strengths are, and even though I enjoy contracting and I enjoy accounting, it's not what I am. So I'm much more creative. I have a dance background, so I definitely enjoyed the development process a lot, and I love filmmaking itself, like being on set and seeing everything come together and the edit. Like I kind of love it all, but yeah, I felt in this experience the parts that I loved the most I didn't get to experience because I was so busy or so occupied with the kind of business affairs side of things that I kind of felt ripped off.
Yeah, you've got to do it again then.
Yeah, but with someone who likes all those things.
So what about the finance side of it? Because you are almost kind of getting that angel investment and getting those different rounds of funding to kind of reflect a business aspect. So how involved were you in that? Did you have people supporting you as far as getting the funding? It was
mainly me, and then Jan would definitely step in and make the calls that needed to be made when they needed to be made, which was great. But no, yeah, that was all me.
Very good. And Rachel, for you by nature of being Brian's wife, probably very involved in getting this film up as well, not just looking after the directorship.
No.
You just left that to him?
No, I'm in awe of, I know just from living with it and in it, how stressful it is, and I wouldn't want it for quids. And I know that, the difficulty, the balancing of the investments, and, anything can go wrong. It's like you're not really in the bad weather. An actor, like Richard's wife did a hip just before he started to shoot, and there was a terrible moment when we were all about to go, and Richard sort of started to talk about, I can't leave my wife with her broken hip, I've got to go. And then 2 days before he arrived, he also had a melanoma or something, and then Sam then had to go and do some wine expo in the middle of it. And it was like, these things are thrown at you, and I can just see Brian and Deb Alderson, the other producer, just going, oh my God, don't tell Rachel. Yeah. Don't tell anybody else. We'll just keep it to ourselves, And I remember when we did Beautiful Kate, Rachel Griffiths was contracted to a show that she was doing in LA, and suddenly they wouldn't let her do what she was having to do or something. So suddenly there was going on. So they are just carrying this hideous firecracker in their trouser pocket that is about to go off at any moment.
And you can't predict it.
No. And somehow it's sort of, you have to dance through it kind of thing. You have to hold it all together.
And then for Brian to act through it as well.
Yeah, that would have been
involved in the film.
Yeah, he then quits. He actually really drops it. Once the acting starts, he goes, over to you. I don't want it, unless it's really dire, don't come to me with it. Yeah. So he's got a good excuse.
The one amazing thing, obviously, though, is that, I've made a film, and I've made a film with an amazing collaborator, and so I definitely feel so creatively involved in the whole process, and I'm so proud of it. So there is that.
Your name is on the credits.
Shannon was like, look, it's your name. And I was like, oh yeah, that's really good,
Well, let's talk about the collaborations, because Shannon, you're part of the Dollhouse, which is, help me out, Gracie Otto, Rose Byrne.
Crew Boylan and Jess Carrera.
And so how have you got that girl gang together, and what do you guys do?
Well, Jess said one day, look, let's form a collective. We're all friends anyway, and we were often talking.
She's friends with Rose Byrne.
Well, we were talking about how it's sort of easier to have a development hub of material if there's more than one of you, and we're all out reading material, and we're all kind of out sharing dialogue about films or things that we've seen, and so that's how it began. And then we also started talking about how we wanted to see more projects from women or feminists is sort of how we approach it. And also each project needed to have 2 or 3 of us involved at some level. So that's something we've still been doing, and we've got quite a lot of projects in development, and we've just had 2 short films on at Sydney Film Festival. And then Crew Boylan's script, Seriously Red's, getting developed at the moment. So hopefully that'll be going, I think, at the end of the year. So yeah, it's just a really wonderful, and even though sometimes we're really busy and we don't always get to be completely involved in the work, it's nice to know that it's always there, and we keep dipping back in and helping one another, and we're very supportive of each other.
Support network.
And it's really nice to watch how everyone is kind of expanding in their work.
And I think that very much the theme for the Sydney Film Festival was that 50-50 by 2020. So the idea that women would be represented in front of and behind the camera. But Rachel, for you, when you were acting, you didn't really see an example of a lot of women as producers. You were quite amazed. Which was it?
No, not produced. There was just no women on set at all.
Yeah.
There was people in makeup trailer and wardrobe, but you were the only woman on set.
And what was the film that made you realise a woman could do this? You were telling David Stratton.
I suppose it was seeing my brilliant career and seeing the piano and going, oh, women are capable of helming something. They are capable of directing the army. I think of sort of Phil Noyce, who's bring the tanks in from Russia over there. Let's bring the Americans in from over here, and let's do it. The generals can come down here. And you kind of go, well, yeah, but that's great. But actually, there are some stories that we have as much of a right to tell our stories and to be the storyteller and to be the one who is putting out our values, our sensibilities, our preoccupations as much as anyone, because those 50% audience is women. Yeah. So,
Well, what's nice in film that you're just starting to see happen is that the women are being given the directing and producing roles on the really big, possibly war films or action films, because that's the thing that I always found, like in the theatre world, I got quite stuck, but I couldn't complain because I always still had a slot and I was often the only female in a season. But I was always given the smallest budget project and the smallest cast, and that never changed, and I just got so fed up, which is why I thought I'm going to switch to, I'm going to try and switch.
But didn't that mean that they were actually the more interesting and more intimate stories?
I think I benefited a lot also from the anger and the challenge of trying to keep my cool and still making interesting work. I did often enjoy the projects, but I didn't like that when I pitched bigger projects that I was genuinely passionate about, that I had comments that were like, but you're the new funky director, so you do the new independent new writing. And new writing is amazing, and it's what I am really passionate about, and I love dramaturging new scripts. But the problem was it also meant that I could never get more than 3 or 4 stars for a review, because really the classics always get the 5 stars in a way, because they're, tried and tested, and your interpretation is so clear, your directing is so evident. Whereas, often, like you, I do like to put my stamp on things, but I also don't want people to be distracted by that. And so that's an art form in itself, but it's not as recognised. And you don't get auteur unless you're going...
It's like acting too, if you notice. The actors really who get your attention, and all the great actors, are the ones that show the shit out of their acting, if you think about it.
I know!
Isn't that true?
It gives me the shit!
Oh my God, and the really good ones who are just, actually people like Julia Roberts, who's actually brilliant because she's just so present. And I mean, I'm not going to make this a whole thing about Julia Roberts, but, and I don't know where that happened. But, she's just an underrated, I mean, she's loved, of course, but she's underestimated as an actor. She's a supreme actress. As supreme as Kate or Jeffrey or Meryl,
But overacting is often what gets awards.
Yeah, overacting is what gets awards.
Or the difficult
and
parts.
over-directing is what gets awards too. Show me the camera and I'll give you 5 stars.
Yeah. Interesting. So for you as well, Alex, I think it's a common to all of us, but there's children across the board as well. So talking about women in film, it's impossible to talk about that without acknowledging children, now grandchildren, and kind of each of you. How do you navigate through life with a very small child at home?
I was very fortunate that I have an amazing partner who stayed at home and took over that role while I made the film. But I remember Shannon said to me, because Shannon's similar, she's got
And Dan's, you were saying, is the primary caregiver as well.
The smartest thing we ever did was marry actors.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like, you don't think so for a long time, and then you're like, this is genius. Because they, unemployed. Totally. And even
they've got their audience.
Yeah, and and even when they're busy, they're still not as busy as us because they get to walk on set and then walk off, whereas we're like on all the time. And so it's just brilliant.
But Shannon did say to me, I mean, because I did struggle because my kid was only 1.5 when we went into pre, and that was hard. And I was still breastfeeding, and so I had to stop because I realised I was just exhausted and that she was taking it all from me. And Shannon said, you know, it's really great that we have these amazing partners, but it doesn't mean that it's any better because we probably haven't seen our kids for like 2 weeks. Yeah. And so, you know, it is true. It's like, to do it, you need support, but you also need to be able to be a parent still. Yeah. And that was something I definitely struggled with because I missed putting her to bed. I missed seeing her as much as I possibly could. I mean, they came to work, which was pretty hilarious, together. Our kids are a similar age, so I think they're becoming friends. Yeah. So yeah, it's tough. It's really tough.
And I guess we have much better models in society of what women can do. But Rachel, we were talking beforehand, it was a lot harder for you. And you were saying life is very long in that you almost we stop and raise our family and not realise that we need to
I was just saying how lucky we are that we all have suddenly this other chapter that before for women was gone. You know, it's like, and I think it probably is in many careers. You know, suddenly you aren't necessarily put out to pasture at 30. You know, I suddenly find at 50, at 60, I'm making a film. I've got, you know, quite a few on my slate. May happen, may not. I'm really loving, you know, this whole new chapter of grandparenting, but I also feel really strong creatively. I finally really know what I like. I've got the confidence to say what I think and bugger whether people like it or not. You know, so it's actually, I was just saying, there's lots of time, you know, there's plenty you have lots of different chapters, you know, you have these great 10-year blocks, you know. 50s, I did some films and I did some television and the kids all left home, and then I was, you know, and then I didn't work for 6 years, and that was really horrifying, and I thought, oh my God, it's over, you know, I'm too young for it all to be over. And then this came along, and, you know, and I kind of feel very positive that it's going to go on you know, there's no reason why it shouldn't go on while I'm healthy. And I think there is a bit of ageism in there, there's no question, particularly with, it was both men and women, but there's a bit of ageism, I think, but...
I know, but we should adopt the kind of Asian mentality of treasuring people the older they get and the wisdom that they offer.
Not only that, but it's, if you don't know, to know that there is still that longevity, there is that, you can take the risks, you can have the children, you can do it all, knowing if you suddenly go, okay, it's all going to be over by the age of 50, I've got to stack it all in now. It becomes, you know, a horrible conundrum about whether to have the next child or not, or if you know that there's possibility of it going over and that, you know, there's still opportunity there. I don't know, it's sort of, I feel that actually sometimes governments need to make more of an effort to go, there is a workplace there, have the kids if you want to have the kids. You know,
and it's something we've talked about on this panel, the multi-generational workforce, and the idea that people are working much longer and we're all working alongside each other now. It's not this golden age and then we sort of go out to pasture, like you say. So for you, Shannon, how do you find juggling motherhood, filming, production?
Well, I don't really get this thing that I've heard about called mother's guilt. I feel like when I'm with my child, I'm so incredibly present and I know that I'm a good mother. And so even when I have these times where I'm away, I know she's also got incredible grandparents and an incredible father. And so I don't feel that. And so even though, of course, I miss her, you know, I don't...
And it's not an issue for me. She taught me that, I have to say. Like, because I was tipping into mother guilt, and then I kind of went, actually, just because I'm not there, she's having a great time. Like, she doesn't need me all the time to be happy, and it's actually very liberating.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And we're very close, and I can feel that. You know, I think if I felt that there was a problem with the relationship, then I would look into that. But I don't.
I love that. And now each of you, another commonality is that you are married to actors. So how does that make kind of the dynamic in the house. I'm curious just to sort of, you know, aside from movies and things, what's it like when you're arguing, or can you kind of get the authentic self in those moments?
Oh, it's probably so normal, the arguing, like compared to any relationship, but...
Is it arguing or acting? Can you tell when
Oh, no. Oh, no, there's no acting allowed in arguments.
No. Except that, but don't you find that sometimes when you're in a role, you're like, oh, you're arguing like the character. Do you get that? Sometimes I'm like, Eden, you're yelling at me like, you know, Malcolm from... Like, I don't like it.
No, because my husband's such an anti-actor. Like, he would love to never talk about acting. I mean, he surfs, he has lots of other hobbies. I'm obsessive about work. I want to talk about it all the time. And I'm sure he must find it really annoying because it's all I can think and talk about. So I'm very one-dimensional in that sense, and he offers the ability to allow me to think about how to have a more balanced, healthy lifestyle, I think.
And I guess actors are taking on and off personalities like clothes and roles and things. So maybe that makes it easier for you, Rachel.
No, I think what makes it difficult is that they're used to people bringing in cups of coffee and cups of tea and saying, Ron, are you okay? Did he bring you something? And you're coming home and you go, hello.
So who is the real hero in movie making? Like, who is the one that... kind of, if you had to pick one, is it the actor, is it the producer or the director? Are you able to sort of split it out?
I don't quite understand the question.
I'm just thinking, what makes a movie a success? Is it just, of course it's all three, but if you really could only pick an amazing actor or director or producer?
Oh, I think it's... Right.
True. Okay.
Yeah, true.
You've all gone rogue on me.
No, it is a writer. For sure.
Yeah, because without that, I mean, that's your architecture. And if it's not right, I mean, that's why we spent 6 years developing Babyteeth, even though it was already a play, and the same as you, I'm sure. Like, you know, it's got to be massaged. And sometimes I'm a bit scared about transitioning to TV because I love that. And that was something Jan taught me, was to spend that time. So, and sometimes I feel Australian TV kind of doesn't give it that time that it really needs. So, but definitely.
Good answer. Right. Well, I'm going to cast it out to the audience. We've got 5 minutes for some questions of these
Any
three.
filmmakers here?
There's an actor, there's a lot of film.
Oh, hello. Do I know you? No, maybe not.
Famous. Does anyone got a question?
Senile, it's okay.
You talked about the scale of the industry with respect to the opera house, and yet I think in each of you, you talked about the funding reliance on Screen Australia, Destination New South Wales. At what point can the Australian film industry mature to a point that economically will
Never. We're too small. We're too small a country. You can do it with a big country because you get the box office. We can never get the box office that will sustain, will give us the budgets that we need. You know, very rarely does a film make its budget back.
Yeah.
And if we want to have our own culture, we have to get government support.
And I think if you look at places like Germany, where they put so much more money than even, much more than we do into opera, the arts and film, everything, and they don't even sort of think twice about it. It's you know, their audiences are huge. Every night at the theatre. It's just I think it's something that we could be even more into.
Yeah. And also, it's too high risk too, that it doesn't pay off to invest in film. You've got to be crazy to invest in film. It's just
Unless it's a good script. So.
Well, it doesn't work. It's not the same system works, isn't it?
Well, I guess the reward is kind of mental health for an entire country, but it's really hard to kind of explain, qualify that. I know.
I mean, we all know how you know people receive us overseas. It's so much in reference to our films. So you know, it really is it's a very valuable investment. I mean, of course we all want more, but we're pretty lucky, aren't we? Compared to other countries, we're pretty damn lucky.
Becoming colloquial rather than content, because if that investor is doing the tourism and the representation of Australia or Australiana, you lose some of that storytelling, don't you?
No, not really. They're not allowed to have that.
They don't really put that pressure on you, actually.
No.
So you could tell an overseas story, or does it need to be an Australian-based story, even if it's not the kind of typical
It has
Aussie?
to have you have to have enough Australian content to be able to access Screen Australia funding. Otherwise, there's other models like co-productions, and that's a whole other different thing which needs to be organically driven. I think that I think the screen bodies are interested in us telling stories that are authentic to us, whatever that might mean. So, and there's different strands to what that is. So, we have our Indigenous stories, we have our cultural stories, and we just have stories. And I think that they're open to all of that, as long as, we do have to tick some boxes to make sure that we're significant Australian content. But I think we're really lucky.
There's a lot of stats on the Screen Australia website. I think it's really interesting. I think 9 out of the 10 films funded got up and kind of were a success. So have a look at that. Is there one more question, Victoria?
I was just going to ask, how do you handle the quiet times? When nothing much is happening, in terms of your own mental health and how you feel about yourself and your identity and all of that?
Right now I'm looking forward to it. But I know in about 6 months I'll be like, oh my God, what's happening?
Yeah, I'm not very good with it, I have to say, the quiet time. But I find my own projects. If nothing's coming to me, I've always done that. I generate them myself. I have so many friends that are in the industry, and I go to them, I go to actors or writers, and I say, what have you got? I want to put something on, so I reach out.
And there's one sneaky question. Okay.
But also lots of therapy and meditation.
Yeah.
It's our only director.
Where's our director?
No, you go.
All right, both of you, if you're quick.
I'll be really quick. Netflix has opened an office in Sydney and 11 million Australians are subscribed to Netflix. How do you see this as an opportunity to create great original Australian content? Is it an opportunity or not?
Well, we don't know.
That's the
we
thing.
don't know. We don't know what what's it called? What their quota is. We have to push for the quota, and at the moment the government is not, I don't think, working hard enough for us. I mean, I think they need to be pretty stroppy about it. They've opened in the office here. They obviously, they're obviously keen to do Australian product content. But at the moment they're not insisting quite enough, I don't think. But how do you feel about that?
I think it's going to create a lot of opportunities.
Yeah.
I think the hardest thing is, I don't know, this is speaking, I don't know how you get into Netflix.
They have made some shows here already, though.
Yeah, no, I know. I worked on the one in Alice Springs. But I think, I don't know how, I think it will create opportunities, but I'm not sure what those opportunities will, because...
And the quality of the opportunity.
But when you have a potential audience of 11 million people watching Netflix, and that's just a household, that doesn't count 5 people within the house. I think when you've got that many eyeballs, I would hope that there is opportunity for more Australian.
I think they're finding that the more authentic the product the product is, the more it's liked.
Yeah.
So there's great incentive for them to go and tell an Icelandic story, an Australian story, an Abu Dhabi story or whatever. People like the authenticity of different places and cultures. So that works in our favour. But we do have the government slightly laying them, prostrating themselves and going, come take everything you want. We'll give you lots, but we won't ask you to give us anything. There's a little bit of that going on, I think.
Watch this space. And the last question at the back there.
I was going to ask. I know you were saying when you're directing, you prefer to leave you don't want to see the camera. You want to focus more on the performances, and you focus on that. How much then are you leaving the look of the film to the DOP as opposed to how much,
Well, I'm leaving everything, because I'm not very good on shutters and all that sort of stuff. So, I can look at it and go, I think we're a bit overlit, or we're a bit, this, that and the other. But a lot, I'm leaving a lot to the DOP.
That was Bonnie
Elliott.
A genius.
Yeah, genius. And I'm leaving quite A lot, because it's her job. It's her job. How I can't tell her how to do the job. I know what I'm responding, and I know what I'm liking, and I know that if we're doing too much with the camera, I can go, I don't think we need to do as much. Or it's a conversation. It is a conversation. But generally, you find you work with people who have a similar sensibility, so it all works out pretty good.
Well, if I end on the note that Rachel made at the very start, and it was something that you said with David Stratton, just that idea of when you see an Australian film, get out and see it in the opening week, because it might not be there the next week.
Yeah, it is really incumbent on us, if we're at all interested, to get in there straight away. Yeah.
So when is your film in the cinema?
The 8th of August, thanks for asking.
And when is your film in the cinema? Okay. Watch this space. So please thank our incredible panel here. And a thank you to Georgia, who I've spotted now, for introducing me to these two lovely ladies as well. And you'll notice that next month we are looking at travel. Everyone is going to be overseas. I think when we look at our Instagram feeds in July, it seems everyone's overseas. So we thought we'd look at travel, and that one's on the 30th of next month. But thank you all for coming. Thanks to the panel.